Well, we will move now to a keynote to know if the financial sector is aligned. Please welcome the Sustainable Finance Observatory Director, Raphaël Lebel.
Good afternoon, everybody. $7,000 billion. According to the United Nations, that's the investment needed each year to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and make the world peace with prosperity for people and the planet. If we focus only on climate goals, we are talking about 80% of it. 80% of it. This estimation is a program for 15 years, which means that we are talking about $85,000 in 15 years. $85,000. Now, in 2022, we are in the middle of this agenda. Well, do you think we invested half of it? Well, we didn't. From 2015, we only invested $6,000 billion. So which means what we did in 7 years, what we should have done in 1. It's important because if we don't reach this intermediate objective of 2030, there is no chance that we meet the objective of net zero by 2050. It will be pretty impossible. Let's have a look on this investment. According to the Climate Policy Initiative, in 2020, we invested only 11% of what was needed. 11%. And on this investment, 90% were for mitigation and 10% for adaptation. Well, why aren't we shifting this famous trillion we are talking about for 7 years? Who is investing and how much? In France, we launched a Sustainable Finance Observatory to track and publish such information in open data. We did it with the main financial actors and other partners, and I want to thank them all for all the work we've done together. At the Sustainable Finance Observatory, we always try to put in perspective the data we are publishing. So, how much is $85,000 billion? Well, according to the OECD, there is about $380,000 billion worth of dollar in the world. $380,000 billion. So what we are talking about, it's mobilizing 22% of the global wealth in 15 years to finance the transition. That's the goal. Well, the good news is the financial sector is engaged. You are engaged. That's why we are here today. So for years, we worked on the transition and we made new products. We launched the green bonds and social bonds and transition bonds. We start to labelize some funds. So in French, we launched the ASR label, the Greenfin label, the financial label. Each one has their own specificities. In total, we estimate that there is about 38,000 billion of assets which are invested under environmental, social, or governance criteria. But that doesn't mean that they are financing the transition. That's not the same. That's something we should all have in mind. The only way to reach net zero is to stop emitting greenhouse gases. The only way to reach net zero is to stop investing in activities which are emitting greenhouse gases. And this is important because if we don't stop that, we will activate unpredictable change of the climate and the biodiversity that we know today. So, I'm sorry. So what I wanted to say is that it's very important to stop investing in greenhouse gases, but also we need to understand that we need time to phase out. Of course, I'm not telling you that we should stop using fossil fuel today or tomorrow. That would be irresponsible and impossible regarding the energy mix and regarding the geopolitical situation. Of course not. What I even say is that we should open some new fossils activities. In emerging countries, if we want to do a fair and just transition, we have to open some kind of these activities. But what we need to do is to phase out regarding the global scenario, the global greenhouse gases, to be aligned with the IPCC scenario with the scientists. So we need to phase out from fossil fuels. How much are we doing it? A strong call has been made in Paris about coal exit for years. And 2 years ago, in France, we were the first financial center to publish the exposition on coal. And today, we are publishing a first estimation of the exposition in all fossil fuels using the data of Burns and Schur. So it's a first estimation, but we believe that it should be a good example for other countries to do so. We did this work using the methodology and the data of the NGO Urgewald, and we then have a first estimation of the exposure of the Paris place. But I have a bad news. Even with all this effort, commitment, and work done by all of us, many in this very room, some analysts are still warning us about some financing still going on to coal activities. And it's pretty sure that, yes, there is financing still going on, even from French players who took this kind of commitment. So why? How could this be possible? After all this work we've done together, everything we did, how is it possible that this financing is still going on? Is it a problem of policy? Is it a problem of data? Is it a problem of indicators? What are these indicators we are using? How we define them? And can we trust them? Are there lighthouses that we can rely on to find green countries? Or are they sometimes just an illusion, a wind that leads us to the cliff? Well, as captain, sailing our companies in the deep ocean and the wide sea, we need to be completely sure that we utilize indicators, that they are trustable, that they are very sure, that guide us to the right direction, that guide us to the net zero transition. Let me tell you a story. Let's imagine a financial company. We'll call it Bid Invest. Bid Invest is an engaged company. It could be a member of Finance for Tomorrow. And they decided to go out from coal and align their portfolio to net zero. So first, they define a coal strategy. You know that. So they define the scope of exclusion, all the value chain. That's important. And then they made sure to have no exception with high threshold. And they have an agenda aligned with the International Agency of Energy, 2030-2040. Nice. And this policy applies for the current portfolio and for the new investment. Best-in-class policy. Well, I'm sorry, but dear Bid Invest, you are still financing the coal, and you are still very much exposed to the coal. Why? Let me explain. Well, first, the policy doesn't always cover all the services and activities and products of the financial company. For example, today, as we are publishing exposure indicators, for example, for Burns, we are only using the data of loans portfolio, corporate loans, sorry. which is great. And that's very important to evaluate the risk of such data and such investment, the loans. But the thing is, you can't finance a coal mine using bond issuance. And for the climate, it doesn't matter if a mine or coal activity is financed by bonds or by loans. That will make exactly the same greenhouse gases. Let's take another example. Even if Bid Invest excludes all the value chain, Bid Invest will likely still continue to invest in all other firms, industry companies, using behind the electricity from the coal sectors. The coal sector will still have customers to buy their electricity. So that means the coal sector will still run. They will still even get grants from their local government to develop the world economy. And that means that Bid Invest is exposed to the coal. What happens if the coal prices goes up? Well, the price of all products there goes up. It's just like the farmer using fertilizer. If the gas prices goes up, well, everything price change. So of course, Bid Invest is exposed to the coal. Last but not least, what is going to happen when this firm, Bid Invest, is going to apply this coal policy? Well, most likely, it's going to sell these coal activities, these coal actors, these coal assets. Why? Because that's much easier to sell it than to close it, which is a loss of assets, or to transform it, which is not so easy. So selling an emissive asset and buying instead some wind farm or solar panel already in place, big firm is going to align its portfolio to net zero. But is there a real change in the economy? There is not. Is there a real reduction of greenhouse gases? There is not. Those examples are just some, and I'm sure there is many others, but we can see that using the wrong indicators, well, we are not really seeing the real contribution of these Bid Invest example firms to the net zero transition. That's why we need to work all together to define the good indicators. That's why we need to keep mobilizing. And I saw many of different actors today, from public, private sector, supervisors, regulators, some NGOs, scientists, maybe even the activists this morning in their own way. But we need to work together to find these lighthouses, indicators that lead us to the right direction. And I have a good news. With the mobilization of all actors who join the Net Zero Alliance, there is more than enough assets already engaged to the transition. They are there. But what we need to make sure is that this transition is doing right, using the good indicators. You get it, I think. So let's try to make these lighthouses indicators that will lead us to the net zero horizon. Remember, we are already late reaching this 85,000 billion. Remember, each passing year makes the next year investment bigger, so it makes it more difficult. Remember, each passing year makes the cost of adaptation higher, especially for emerging countries. So remember, we need to work together. It's still possible, so we can do it. And each year matters. Thank you so much.